Welcome to episode 28 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and I'm here today, as always, with Evan. How are you today?
I'm doing just swell. How are you doing?
I'm also doing swell. I'm doing quite well.
We're both swelling together. That's so nice to hear.
I'm swelling with joy over the fact that we don't have to deal with as much patches.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've only seen him once since the
Yeah.
patch, like total. I was like, whoa, he's still around. I'm
I
pretty sure I won that game.
yeah, I saw him. I saw him a bit on like the first few days, but I haven't really seen a lot of him in my more recent extended play sessions.
And yeah, it really like when he came out, the one game I saw him, it was just like that doesn't attack immediately. I don't care.
Right. Oh man, I have a bad beat story. So I, after this patch, I decided to boot up one of my arena decks, right? Because that arena event is happening, and like I tend to build a deck because that's the most fun part, and then I actually don't play the games very quickly at all.
Oh yeah, I actually think I might know where the story is creeping.
Yep, you got it. I had made this paladin deck with 2 corridor creepers before the nerf, and like obviously it was sick, and then the nerf hit, and it wasn't as good. It was not nearly as good anymore. So
That's
that
a
was
bummer.
a sad day. It was a real bummer. I think I even had a bone mare in there. My deck just got real nerfed.
Like, well, if I bone mare my corridor creeper,
I mean, it's still a big boy if you do that, but like,
it's just so much more mana.
yeah, it's just not going to be as good. So I think, I mean, the patch was pretty significant. I think that like a lot of archetypes that existed and were strong and played, and strategies that were strong and played before the patch are just not being played or not strong anymore. Like Tempo Rogue.
Yes, that's I think the biggest change is going from a good deal of tempo rogue and it being really strong no matter what to it's just not around anymore.
I mean, it's a pretty shocking change, you know.
Yeah, you know, because usually a nerf won't like completely hose a deck, though. You know, well, a deck that strong. Obviously, the Raza nerf completely got rid of the Rosakas deck.
Sure.
I've definitely not seen any of that, and as far as I can tell, it's not existent. Though Priest is doing well. Um, the other Priest decks that existed seem to be cleaning up pretty effectively. Dragon Priest and Big Priest.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, both the Spiteful Dragon Priest deck was kind of already a deck prior to the patch. I
Mhm.
think it just like because you know the Dustbreaker is still a really insane card, and so is Draconic Operative, and Spiteful Summoner is also really good when you have Free from Ember or Mind Control, both of which are great cards on their own. And I just think that like if you were playing Priest, you almost had no reason to be playing a deck that fair when you could just play Rosakas.
Right.
So we ended up not seeing a lot of it on the ladder, kind of because of that.
Yeah,
But
you could just play Rosakas, but it really, you know, the deck was using Corridor Creeper, um, and I'm sure some of them are using patches with South Sea Captain, but those were not integral cards, and not needing to deal with them probably helps a lot more than it hurts.
yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's like Captain seemed like it was actually optional in some of the builds,
Yeah,
and I mean I chose to run it because I thought it was strong enough. But like it didn't seem, you know, super critical. And Corridor Creeper obviously was great, but it wasn't great because it like fit into the deck strategy per se, like not in the same way that it did Tempo Rogue strategy. It was just like one of the most efficient minions you could be playing, and you should definitely play it because it's neutral in a minion deck. Um, so it turns out that the deck strategy is very much intact once you take out all of those power cards, and it could already afford to not run Bone Mare. I mean, I think some decks didn't, so it's good.
yeah.
It's
I don't
alive.
know how often it was using Bone Mare.
Yeah. So actually, I think right after the patch hit, I like opened up Hearthstone and I, you know, dusted all the cards
Hmm.
immediately because I figure recraft them later if I want them. Otherwise, I just want full dust. And all of my decks were invalid except Big Priest and Q Block.
The
So
exact same thing happened to me, but I didn't have Big Priest built. I
I
literally was
sure did.
just went to go with like, I'll play Hearthstone now. I guess we're playing Warlock.
Yeah, I mean, turns out Q Block is actually doing really well.
Yep, we had predicted that that'd definitely be one of the biggest decks, maybe even problematically effective. I don't think it's a problem. I think that there are definitely a bunch of good decks right now, but
Mm.
Q-Block might be one of the best ones.
Yeah,
And there's a ton of different ways to make Control Warlock that don't have the cube or don't have Doomguard. They have Rin. Um, that deck still doesn't even seem to have settled on the best build. So that deck's probably going to continue to like get better, or at least stay as successful as it is.
definitely it needs to do some tuning. Because I mean, the list, like, I think it had a bunch of flex slots. It kind of inherently does. You could run stuff like Hellfire, or not, or you could run 1 Defiler, 2 or 0. So I think that, like, depending on the types of decks that see play, in going into the future, we'll see refinement of that list, and
Mm-hmm.
that will be, that'll be really interesting to see. So one thing I saw kind of as a reaction to the immediate popularity of that deck, a lot of people were just, saying right away, like, oh, Cube Block's going to dominate, like, we're going to see a cube meta, blah, 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 blah. One of the reactions to that, the sort of pre-actions to that, was an increase in frequency of Spellbreaker play.
Yep, I've been seeing more lists that are like playing 2 copies, for example.
Yep.
And it's just seeming like more and more of a card that you want in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, Spellbreaker was already a great choice at its cost. Like, Silence is a strong effect. Iron Beak Owl is a card that got nerfed,
Mm-hmm.
Priest ran, like, the card Silence, 0 mana, silence a minion. It's a strong effect in Hearthstone when people are looking to get, value out of their minion when it can't attack anymore. So, it's really like, Spellbreaker is just an efficiently costed card, efficiently statted for that effect. Paying 2 points of toughness over the vanilla test for Silence is a fine deal.
Yep, he's showing up a lot. Another card that I suddenly started seeing more of since the patch is Glacial Shard.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, but like, yeah, Patches kind of wrecks that card, and it's been a great card the whole time. It was just Patches was around, so we couldn't really do anything. But I'm really happy about it. He's showing up in a ton of different decks.
Yeah, I saw. So I saw a lot of Glacial Shard or not a lot, but I saw some Glacial Shard, and like we as a community saw Glacial Shard a bit in the Zulok deck before the nerf.
Yeah.
So some of the Zulok builds were running it, and I saw it, and it was like, when I first saw that in a list, I was a little skeptical. But I kind of realized, after just deciding to play with it, it seems cute at the very least, and like that's a strong effect for 1 mana, especially on minion. That's actually quite flexible. After playing with it, I was really sold right away, and the fact that Patches isn't around anymore makes it a lot better. And Rogue got weaker, Patches got weaker. 2/1s are back in town.
Yes, Accurate Veteran is also definitely showing up more. There's like this new Dude Paladin deck that is like sort of like Aggro Paladin, but I guess is even more into just having. Oh, it's using Silverhand recruits and using the Silverhand recruit effects.
That's so silly.
That's also partly because Silverhand recruit is better because there's less rogue, like you said. There's fewer patches to kill them, and if you pump your Silverhand recruit, you're less likely, like with an Accurate Veteran, you're less likely to get either of them killed by patches. So those effects are working out better. And Glacial Shard, I think, is also in some of these aggressive Paladin decks. It's also used in some of the Spiteful Druid decks. There's these Druid decks, and instead of using, Wild Growth and Nourish and all of these Wrath, all of these amazing spells get cut, and you only keep the best one, which is Ultimate Infestation. Right. And then your Spiteful Summoners are always giving you 10-drop minions, and you can also use Grand Architect or Grand
Archivist.
Grand Archivist. I always screw that up. I knew I would, and I did. Grand Archivist to play it for 8 mana and also get a 4/7. So that's this new Druid deck that appears to be doing better than Jade Druid. On VS, it's saying that it has a higher win rate. And that deck is using Glacial Shard. One reason is it's great, like after you Ultimate Infestation, and you need to start dumping things from your hand. But really, another reason why Glacial Shard is so good right now is because there's all these people summoning 10-drops on 6 mana. And, like, Deathwing is, like, Glacial Shard's really good against Deathwing.
Sure. Yeah, that's I mean, the prevalence of Glacial Shard prevalence of Spiteful Summoner definitely makes something like Glacial Shard really good, because I think a lot of the decks, if
Exactly.
they're not just going kind of low to the ground, they're going big with some big attacker. I guess Q Block's an exception, but yeah, I agree with you. I think just if you have like huge dumb idiots running around like 12/12s, then cards like Glacial Shard are awesome.
Yeah, and there's also not that 1/1 that's flying in from people's decks, so that just seems like that card suddenly got a lot better, which I really like because I always have loved Frost Elemental. That's been one of
Right.
my favorite Hearthstone cards since it first became a game.
Sure.
And so this guy's just like it, but a lot more like sort of efficient. So I'm glad it's working out for him. Oh, and he was in Quest Rogue, which was a
Hmm.
deck I just was a big fan of. But he's a guy to look out for. I think people have also been dabbling in like elemental decks more and trying to make that work. Now that since Patches is gone, things are kind of a bit slower. Maybe elementals will work now.
Right.
So I think that there's also like builds like Spiteful Druid with elementals. There's also a Cthulhu version, which I
That's
think
silly.
is very silly. Though when I played against someone, they played a Spiteful Summoner and got Cthulhu.
Oh wow. Well, I mean,
Like
that's bad.
obviously, right? Like
Yeah.
summoned a 6/6 Cthulhu and then played a Disciple of Cthulhu and made it an 8/8, and it was like that's so
Whoa.
obnoxious.
That is actually really obnoxious. That's hilarious. Oh man.
I mean,
Yeah, that
a 12/12 to start would have been worse, but
sure.
still, like, come on.
Yeah.
At least give them Yogg.
Yeah, that's silly. The that's an interesting deck. I have not played with it just yet. I've played against it a couple times. Like I mean, it seems strong to me. Druid has always, Ultimate Infestation is a really powerful card, and it has access to a bunch of nice like minions in the class that are really good.
Mhm.
Uh, and are you running like Kelesith in your build at all?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
when I was looking up lists, it seems like that's a really popular thing to do.
Yeah.
Which I thought might change when patches got nerfed, because that's one of the greatest cards with Keleseth.
Mm,
But because you wind up drawing so much of your deck, it's actually going to be relevant more frequently. Like
sure.
because you're playing Ultimate Infestation, Caliset is better than other classes that don't have Ultimate Infestation. Um, and using Saronite Chain Gang, my list is using second rate Bruiser, second hand Bruiser, second rate. Yeah, okay. Second rate Keith. Um, and Spiteful Dude, the Greedy Sprite. So this is a deck for Greedy Sprite because you still want to accelerate your mana. Use Mire Keeper too, of course, but you can't use spells. And Patches is gone, so suddenly Greedy Sprite's a lot better.
Yeah, that is true. So X1s were something that patches. Yeah, that's something we pointed out about patches is that like it makes X1s a lot worse. And Greedy Sprite does something when it dies, which is fine. So it's like not as bad as it could be. But why would you pay 3 mana for Wild Growth when you could just like pay 2 mana for it?
Yeah,
So
it's part of what Greedy Sprite is supposed to be some value out of a minion that could potentially do 3 damage.
right.
And
Yeah,
and if
exactly.
it's just always killing a 1/1 and essentially doing 1 damage, then it's not. That's a lot less value. That's 33% of what you could be getting out of it.
Yeah,
But
and
now it can
the
like
deck.
kill a Spellbreaker.
Right. And the decks weren't necessarily looking for another ramp effect, right? Like a lot of the bigger druid decks like would run, 0 to 2 Mire Keepers. Like Mire Keeper wasn't even an auto include. So it's not
Hmm.
like you're looking for something worse than Mire Keeper. Uh it's cool that it has a home though, because I do think it's a strong card, and like putting it in a spiteful shell is it makes a lot of sense because you lose Nourish and then you lose Wild Growth and you lose Jade Blossom if you're so inclined. But getting access to Greedy Sprite and being motivated. And Mire Keeper is a great card, so you're happy to run that. And then, having the option to run Greedy Sprite is really good.
Yeah,
So,
it's pretty solid. Another card that I'm using in my list right now is Hungry Crab.
oh my god, I got crabbed yesterday playing Murloc Paladin. I was so mad. I think I like shut off Hearthstone after that. It's just like enough for me. Oh,
Yeah.
it was against Zulok. They were just like, they were like, okay, Flame Imp, and then I'm like, I'm gonna play Murloc, and they're like, okay, Hungry Crab, and they
Ooh,
played something else.
out of
Yeah,
Zulok. Yep,
and
that's. I guess that's the thing.
yeah, they turned 4 Crystal Weaver and buffed like 4 things. That was the end of the game. Um, it was yeah, again, the Hungry Crab is hungry right now.
Yeah, he one of the most successful decks, maybe the most successful deck right now, is Murloc Paladin. So
Yes.
there's definitely going to be. There was already a good deal of it on the meta, and now that the reports and data reports have come out saying that it's really good, there's going to be even more.
Yeah,
um,
so if you're looking so Vicious Syndicate has a really cool visualization right now where they show, their power score versus their frequency score. Understanding those metrics is not all that important. You could just think of it as normalized power and frequency, power being win rate. Dude Paladin has a max power score. It is currently setting it's setting their normalization upper bound for power. It has the highest win rate of a deck, but its frequency is really low. So we can expect to see more of that deck soon, and we can also expect to see its win rate go down. Maybe not relatively, but absolutely.
yeah, it's gonna definitely go up in frequency. I saw a bunch of it today already. I was
Yep.
very happy to play my crabs.
Mm.
So yeah, if you're looking for what kind of deck should I play, and you're not too picky, a good place to start would be what decks can get away with having Hungry Crab in them and be happy about it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Zulok is definitely one, and it was working in Spiteful Druid as well. They can potentially be bigger minions if you get your not Hungry Crab. That's what I'm talking about. Your Keleseth, um, so they don't have to be as dead. And you kind of want cheap things to dump from your hand, like I said, when you have Ultimate Infestation coming up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the meta is still very, very volatile.
For sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more refinement that needs to happen in a lot of these lists. So one sign of this is going back to Spiteful Druid for a second. There's several different variants of the deck.
Yeah.
So that's something that we tend to see, like with new decks. You see a lot of different flavors of kind of the same deck, and like we saw this with Tempo Rogue too. Actually, the earliest Tempo Rogue decks that would eventually become the modern Tempo Rogue deck pre-nerf started with like Blaze Collars and Elementals.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
and
Bitter Tide Hydras.
Yeah, totally right. And we even see that with Spiteful Druid. We see an Elemental build, we see a Cthulhu build, and we just see a raw value build. So I think over time, all those decks are similar enough that as one emerges as like more consistent, or perhaps more powerful, depending on what the meta wants, depending on what the sort of the nature of matchups are, that deck will become more prevalent than the others.
Yeah, it's sifting. It's taking some time to settle down.
Yeah,
But they're all pretty valid to play this very moment. But as other decks also get more defined, that'll sort of define which of these is the best one, or maybe there's another. There almost definitely is another way to make your Spiteful Druid deck, and that might actually be what winds up being the future modern version.
Yeah, totally. It could even be that Spiteful Summoner is not the way to do it, but it probably is. I mean, Archivist and Spiteful are just good. They're probably way better than like Nourish and Mark of the Lotus.
It does seem very strong, and yeah, it could partly be that there have been more control warlocks playing Skulking Geist. That was a card that Warlock like to use. That kind of makes it harder to play Jade Druid.
Mm,
So that could be partly affecting why this Druid deck seems to be doing better than Jade's, and maybe Jade's will pick up some steam later. But um, I think that just that you're right, that just the amount of raw tempo you're getting out of those 10 drops
yeah,
or 6, or you know okay, so with Spiteful Druid you do not accelerate into 10 mana as quickly because you don't have the same ramp spells, though you still have 4, which is good.
right,
On the other hand, you can play your 10 mana spell for 8. So you don't need the amount you need to accelerate, you can subtract 2 from
right.
with this list. So that's also like once again, why pay 10 for it when you could pay 8 and then just stuff a bunch of bulky dudes in your deck?
Yeah, I mean, Archivist and Spiteful are ways to get value out of the existence of the spell without actually casting it, without even drawing it. So that sort of makes up for the fact that maybe you're not playing it as quickly, and you just play a deck with a good curve, and then that's fine. That's enough.
Yeah, it's just a lot of like really good neutral minions for the most part in these lists,
Yep.
which is probably part of the reason Cthulhu is an effective option, because that's just a bunch of neutral minions. But we'll see where it goes, though. Whichever list you try, I would still consider some Hungry Crabs.
Yeah, Crab is good right now. I think because after the VS report sort of breakout with like Dude Paladin, we'll probably see some of the Murloc Paladin players shift to dudes because much like Spiteful Druid, these are just shells for a call to arms.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They have different strengths. Murloc Paladin and the old sort of aggro Paladin deck were different decks that were better at different points of the game and could handle different types of threats in different ways. But so I think some form of Murloc Paladin will always exist, even if Dude Paladin is like the stronger aggro deck or the faster aggro deck, just because sometimes its synergy can be explosive in a way that the other deck is not. But still, they do occupy the same spot in archetype space for Paladin. If you want to play the players who like playing one will like to play the other. It's not going to be like, man, I love playing Murlocs, but I hate playing Dude Paladin. Like, that person probably exists, but they're not all that common.
Yeah, they're not abundant. They're not the average.
And if you're trying to prey on a metagame that's weak to aggro because you're on the legend ladder, or it's just a slow day up at rank 5 to 1 or something, then you're just going to play the best one of those two decks.
Yep, and I think right now the Murloc one has a higher win rate, but if suddenly a lot more Hungry Crabs show up, then you might want to play Dude Paladin. That might be the one that is actually more likely to win a game of Hearthstone right now because of how people are reacting to Murloc's win rate.
Yeah, it also depends on which ranks you're looking at. So so it's kind of hard to evaluate, right? So like at ranks 5 to 1 right now, Dude Paladin has a marginally higher win rate than Murloc Paladin. Like, again, the difference is the problem with VS's sort of normalized metrics is it's really tough for you to get an idea of what the error is because you don't actually have real numbers. You have this sort of fake number that they invented now. But the on HS Replay you at least have real numbers, but they have less options for collapsing the data unless you pay them. So we don't have a good idea of which one is actually stronger. One thing I think we can say for certain, though, is that Dude Paladin has some signs of being relatively unrefined. One, it's new. That is like the biggest sign ever. When a deck is new, like there might even be cards that there are 0 of in the list that are part of the core that people haven't discovered yet. Like
what that happened with the Rallying Blade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Rallying Blade is an amazing example of that. Or even Mark of the Lotus and Jade Druid. These are cards that people start with 0 of, and if you ask somebody playing the deck at the time that no one was running it, they'd say like, why would I put that card in my deck when I could play a different card? But towards the end, like cutting Rallying Blade for True Silver Champion just seems like silly.
Yeah, it was way too important.
Yeah, but so the other sign with Dude Paladin, something a bit more concrete than the fact that it's just new, is the current lists are running a lot of one-ofs. So, one Drygold Shaler, one Equality, one Level Up. Like, I'm sure there's a ton of variance between decks in different builds. Like, I bet at ranks, 15 plus, you see a lot more double Level Up, double Vine Cleaver decks. But maybe at lower ranks, you're seeing, 1 to 0 Drygold Shalers, like 0 Vine Cleavers, 2 Level Ups maybe. It's hard to know what the right mix of these cards is.
Yeah.
And the lists that are running kind of one of many different kinds of cards are an effort to find which ones are the right ones, but also a way to deal with a relatively unknown meta. Having just a lot of good one-ups in your deck, something like Quality, can help you beat threats that you weren't prepared for otherwise.
So. Yeah, and they might not be like something like Equality won't be expecting it, so you can get more value out of it. Right.
Yeah, I mean, surprise is a real thing. I remember having a good luck playing like a Tempo Warrior deck on the ladder. I think because people were probably mulliganing for some crappy Dead Man's Hand build. But then you start playing like Kelesith, and then they start dying.
Were you using the 3-mana 4/4 that attacks at random?
No, I was not.
Oh, okay, he's like not very good. I was just wondering
No.
because if he comes down as a 5/5, it's like oh.
Sure.
It looks
No,
like the dude deck could maybe also use Hungry Crab.
yeah, you could fit it in there. It's it's a little bit of a non-bow with Call to Arms. I mean, it's another guy.
That is true.
Yeah, it's that the existence of Call to Arms kind of hurts those types of things. Like Glacial Shard also, I was thinking about that.
Mm.
You know, this is totally the kind of deck that would love to run it, but if Call to Arms pulls it out, it's kind of crappy.
Yeah, it could. I guess that one would depend on how many Murloc decks you're seeing and how much trouble that deck has with Murloc Paladin.
Yeah, it's certainly like the upside just might totally swamp the downside.
This is true. Another class I wanted to talk about is Mage. We didn't really talk much about Mage, but it's also doing really well.
Yeah, that's not too surprising.
Yeah, that one is one of the ones that got hit least by the nerf, right?
Yeah, so I mean, some builds were running Southsea Captain, but it was totally optional. I think mine was because LOL. But like, it was definitely optional and probably not optimal. They were all running Corridor Creeper, but every deck was running Corridor Creeper. The core of Secret Mage definitely survived this nerf. You know, you can take out all the cards that got nerfed, and Secret Mage still exists and still is totally a strong deck. Plus, they have Alaneth, which was, you know, one of the premium legendary weapons from the new expansion.
Yeah, they got hurt as, badly as really any other deck for the most part.
Yeah.
But relatively not that badly. And one of the really nice minions that they are playing now is a 2/1. I can't remember his name.
Cabal Lackey.
Yeah, Cabal Lackey. So that guy's great, and Patches is gone, and Rogue is less abundant, so that makes that card just better.
Definitely.
And it is a really strong strategy, like all the counter spells and explosive runes. It is definitely a really strong deck, and it has game against an aggressive deck. It has game against a control deck. Things like Primordial Glyph can give it flexibility, so it's definitely really powerful strategy.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. Or it's something really interesting to think about. Like, definitely it's a powerful strategy, and it's partly because it gets kind of free disruption out of the Mage secrets. Damage and disruption, both of which are really good against minion decks. Explosive runes are really awesome. Counterspell is an interesting question. Against spiteful decks, is Counterspell better or worse?
I think that it is ultimately like about as good, because it's less likely to come up, but when it does, it's going to be amazing. Unless they were smart enough to keep their coin, but that's only going to even be an option for them 50% of the time. And even that, well, I mean, like the fact that Counterspell is in your deck, you don't even need to play it. The fact that Counterspell is in your deck suddenly changes the way they can use their coin. That's good. Mm-hmm. So in that matchup, it's kind of the same, but yeah, the fact that it won't counter anything for a while, but then you get a lot out of countering their mind control. I think it's just about the same. I don't think it's especially bad or especially good against a spiteful deck.
Because it takes out, one of their most singularly powerful effects. Just playing Counterspell means that card isn't in their hand anymore. Or they don't have the option to play it. And if they do play it, like you ate both a card and a turn, an entire turn. So, I agree with you. I think that's a really interesting point that, those are like just the existence of Counterspell makes those cards a lot worse. I wonder if you could get away with running ice blocks instead of Counterspells.
You probably could, but I think you'd still rather just have Counterspell.
You're probably right. Because you're, if you're facing off against a Call to Arms deck, you're much happier to have the Counterspell.
Maybe you could use Frozen Clone instead.
Yeah, or I guess there kind of isn't another one, but yeah, there's like you have a bunch of options, or like Mana Bind. That'd be silly though.
It's definitely Vaporize. for the Deathwing.
Oh my god. That'd be so silly. I mean, you could run mana bind and just like, zero mana. You could mind control your minion right back.
I'll
Or
take
zero.
that.
Zero mana UI them. I think that deck doesn't want a UI though because of Alana.
Yeah, I guess if they haven't hit Alaneth yet, they might want to.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, definitely.
but yeah, that mage deck is definitely good, and it's pretty much effective against everything, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
There's also the big spell mage deck, which I think did get better after the nerfs, but isn't really high tier.
Yeah, so all slow decks all right, slow decks have an interesting relationship with the patch. The best decks we're seeing right now are aggro decks. In a new meta, aggro decks tend to do really well because slow strategies are not refined yet. A lot of the core of slow strategies are reactive cards, and the goodness of a given reactive card depends on the rest of the meta. So if you have an unrefined meta, an extremely volatile meta, or just an unknown meta, a given reactive card's goodness will be unknown, and because you're trying to win more, that makes it kind of worse. It means you have to jam more situations into your deck rather than having a well-tuned reactive package. You'll have a sort of jack of all trades reactive package, but that might not be good enough. So a deck like Big, this is to say that even if you don't see slow decks being played very much right now, it's because the meta is moving around so much. When the meta settles, some of these slow decks might come out. So decks like Jade Druid might not be doing well now. They might be doing well in a couple weeks.
This is very true. Jade Druid. We've said this before, has some decent amount of flex slots. There's the vital Jade cards, but then beyond that, they actually have a good deal of flexibility what kind of answers they can put in.
Totally.
But yeah, your point is that having answers is only good if there's like consistent questions, because you can't like change your deck in the middle of a game.
Yeah, exactly.
So if everybody's playing all sorts of different threats, and the threats that people are playing are changing frequently, then you can't really make a deck that effectively answers those threats. But once some time passes, and it might show that mind control tech finally is like consistently really good, and then Jade Druid with two mind control techs becomes a thing again.
Yeah, right. It might be that eventually. So like you said, Jade Druid has a lot of flex slots, so that's a deck we can talk about right now. That deck is also good against slow decks that don't win the game on the spot. So if there end up being a bunch of control decks that once the meta settles and those decks manage to refine their answers package such that they become major contenders in the meta and thus more frequent, decks like Jade Druid can come out to prey on them. So if slow decks become more prevalent, Jade Druid will get a little better.
Yeah, if more like maybe not fast but mid-range spiteful decks start to show up, and then those settle, and that sort of becomes the thing everybody's doing. Like playing Jade Druid with two Naturalize might be the way to go.
Yeah, totally right. It might be more of a two Naturalized deck than a Mark of the Lotus deck, and so that's we have to see. Like Big Spell Mage is kind of in the sort of level one of this discussion, which is what is your answer package? What does your deck look like? I think that deck doesn't really have that many flex slots for answer type cards though, because it has to run in order for cards like in order for some of its big spell synergy cards to be consistent, it has to run relatively few spells.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a big weakness of the deck, is that as a deck that is trying to do big things in Mage, it's going to be a little slow. And if you're playing a slower Mage deck, you really just want to be running Fireballs and Ice Blocks. And if you're running Fireballs and Ice Blocks, you want to be running Frostbolts. But it maybe can't do that all that well.
Yeah, I think another problem with it right now, at least, is that its threats aren't right now, going to be more threatening than playing Void Lords, or
Oh yeah.
using Shadow Essence and Eternal Servitude. I think as far as the three Cabal classes go, Warlock and Priest are mostly just doing much scarier stuff. Even if the Control Mage deck is actually very good at board wipes, maybe it's the best one at board wipes, but maybe not. Warlock is really good at clearing the board. Priest is great at clearing the board. So the fact that Mage is, just on par at clearing the board, but doesn't have Void Lord and doesn't have Lesser Diamond Spellstone, makes it less appealing, I think. It has the
Yeah.
Frostlich Jaina is like great,
Oh
but
yeah.
um, that's only one thing. The Warlock decks can do all this cube nonsense, and then also play Gul'dan, and then also play N'Zoth.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's so it just might be trying to do something that other decks are a little bit better at.
Yeah, it might. Maybe someone's going to figure out a different way to do it. Maybe the
Mhm.
thing to do is actually just play Quest Mage. Um, that's definitely something I saw once or twice. Um, and that sort of is very happy there's no patches because that just made stuff faster. And that wants things to be slower.
Yeah.
I still don't think it's so much of a contender though, but
Not yet.
it
Again,
could
I think
be.
that's it's one of those decks that gets better when more slow decks are around because it's like, it's one of those decks that like if the game goes to some critical turn, it just wins. And that's awesome when you're playing against a lot of opponents who are going to give you a lot of time because then you can just reach that turn faster and spend more of your resources on advance or making that clock, shorter. But
Mhm.
against fast decks, you have to spend your resources on setting your opponent's game plan back rather than advancing your own.
Yeah, it's also kind of positioned nicely though. Like the class mage is
Mm.
positioned nicely if there's a bunch of spiteful summoners because freeze effects get better.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, for sure. Um,
And if you're using something like Meteor or Polymorph, those cards also get better. But just the general freeze effects or Frost Nova Doomsayer also gets better when there's a 4/4 and a 12/12 coming down all the time from a deck that it doesn't have many answers in it necessarily.
yeah,
Like
for
the
sure.
spiteful decks don't get to play a lot of removal because of the nature of them.
Yep, definitely. They have to sort of rely on neutral minions for removal effects, and they're not, or whatever their class minions are, and there might not be a lot of options like Fire Plume Phoenix. So, you're a little limited.
Yeah,
Um,
like if your opponent plays a Doomsayer, not going to be like Fire Plume Phoenix times 4
right,
and kill it.
exactly.
That would be very impressive. Um, but I that's another reason why I'm going to see a lot more Spellbreakers, right? It's because these spiteful decks are pretty much always going to play 2 Spellbreaker because that's it. That's all they got.
Yeah.
That's their only option for stopping a Doomsayer is pretty much Spellbreaker. I guess Void Ripper.
Oh yeah, sure.
You could do that, and
Well,
I think that might be. I think there's some combo priest decks. I think that's also a priest deck that you
give me a
can
break.
do where you're playing like the inner fire combo, but you also play
Yeah.
1 or 2 void rippers.
Oh my God, it's Inner Fires 3 and 4. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Um, why not just play like a crazy? I don't. Whatever. I'm not gonna think about that anymore.
There could be. I mean, if there's enough Doomsayers,
Yeah.
um, and if
Yeah.
if
Sure.
anyone played Thrall, like that card is great against Thrall. It's just Thrall is not great against Hearthstone right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an unfortunate part. I mean, the meta got shaken up, so the fact that we haven't seen Shaman and Warrior rise to power yet, or at least in any like with any serious breakout deck, um, that doesn't mean that those classes are still dead. There's like
Mhm.
even in Hearthstone where data is abundant and there are millions of players playing every day trying to optimize the meta, which is updated and data is released on a daily basis. It still takes time to break these things. We still need somebody creative to come around and make a list. It needs to catch on. So
Mhm.
we will see whether Warrior and Shaman are just Toasterino until the next expansion, or if they actually have a viable deck.
Yeah, there could be something that hasn't been figured out yet because it's a lot easier to play Murloc Paladin and
Yeah,
win with
exactly.
that and use one of these effective decks and that's definitely what I do most of the time. And if I feel like I have an idea for Warrior or Shaman, I'll execute it. But I haven't had many of those lately, honestly. Um, and I am excited to maybe have an idea for Thrall or Warrior, or to see somebody else's idea.
Yeah, yeah, it would definitely be interesting. Um, so one class that I don't know if it was helped or hurt by the expansion, but I think probably helped overall is Hunter.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so one,
Yeah.
the lack of corridor creeper hurts Hunter especially because it's a beast, and Hunter could sort of make better use of corridor creeper than other cards.
Hmm.
But the lack of patches means that cards like Alley Cat become a lot better. But also the prevalence of Murloc Paladin, at least right now, this very second, or maybe a couple days ago, um, Hungry Crab is awesome because it's a beast.
Yeah, you're right. That's another. You can add that to the list of hungry crab shells. Get it?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good shell for that. It's kind of always, Hunter's always had a beast synergy going on, so it's always been a good place to stick the crabs. Glocker Crawler is kind of in its grave now, but it's done good work. Hungry Crab, it might be time for that to come out for a little bit.
yeah, you could just take your hunter list with the two Galactic crawlers and then just switch them out for hungry crabs. And it's updated for the post nerf. And don't forget to take out your corridor creepers.
Yeah, do that. Put in like Bitter Tide Hydra or something, or Spellbreaker.
Once again, the least punishing deck to forget your corridor creepers in would be Hunter, probably, because you can Hound Master it and you can unleash the Hounds to get it out there faster than any other class, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still probably not worth using that card.
No, I don't
But I
think
would
so.
I would say that, yeah, the strength of patches um, was, and also Rizaka's Priest probably hurting Hunter. I think that the data report says that like Secret Hunter's actually pretty all right. It's
Yeah,
like tier
so
two or something like that. Spell Hunter.
Secret and Spell are being played, but I mean, like, I think Spell Hunter is one of those unrefined meta decks. At least it was at the beginning of the expansion. So we'll see if it sticks around.
Hmm.
It could be, I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Because it was doing really amazing things and during the first week of Kobolds and Catacombs, but that was also before the breakout of Corridor Creeper. So it could be that with no Corridor Creeper around anymore, like that deck is actually viable. But that remains to be seen. It does have the weakness of having a relatively thin set of cards that it can play. That the stack of cards that you can actually stick into that deck is relatively small, a little bit like Taunt Warrior, where that stack of cards is either good against the meta or it's not, and that means the deck is either good against the meta or it's not.
Yeah, it's Hunter. At least if you're going to play it, it's going to be aggressive and have reach, and that is a good quality to have. When the meta's unrefined.
Yep,
So
for sure.
just playing some aggressive Hunter deck with Hungry Crabs is probably pretty solid. I'm sure some people are also fooling around with Spiteful Hunter using Call the Wild.
Call the Wild, that's so dumb.
But I think part of the issue with that is how much Hunter likes its spells. Like Animal Companion and Kill Command are like really great.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll be worth it. I mean, Call the Wild is a pretty strong spell.
Yeah, I mean, it can afford to cut its spells. It's not really losing a whole lot. It's just, like you said, it's not clear if it's actually better to lean on that 6 mana minion and then that 9 mana spell, or to just like stick the spells in and go faster.
Yeah, like you can play Savannah Highmane, and that's still pretty brutal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Like you're not, it's still going to be extremely good and like, sometimes better. So.
Though Grand Architect is definitely excellent with Call the Wild.
Oh yeah, that's brutal.
Because that one, the main problem with Grand Architect is it's not gonna let you aim.
Yeah.
It's like let me pick for you. You can mind control their Firefly. I'll ultimate infestation myself.
Right.
So
not that that's the worst thing.
No, that is a testament to how good ultimate infestation is. But
right.
Even just like spray fire, no decision making, it still winds up being very good.
Yeah.
But you don't need to make the decision with Call the Wild, though you don't get to attack with the charge minion immediately, which kind of sucks. Though you definitely get the taunt minion immediately. You'll just get you go from no board to quite a lot of stuff for 8 mana, which is what Call the Wild used to be, right?
Oh, for 8 mana with Archivist, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, like, Copper loses charge, but Misha's still there, so...
It's like it costs 8.5.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, we mentioned this at the beginning, the class that really lost out on this patch was Rogue. which is like, so I think there's a few reasons for this. Even, you could say like, okay, well, the old Tempo Rogue deck didn't run Quarter Creeper and it did fine. It was still a dominant force in the meta, but it leaned very heavily on patches. So part of the
So
reason,
heavily.
so heavily. I mean, Deckhand and Burglar and South Sea Captain were all in the deck. It was basically a pirate deck.
And,
So,
and and patches just was coming out turn 1, 2, or 3 every game.
yes.
Like that is really significant.
Yeah, also the fact that its hero power was awesome in an environment where patches was so prevalent.
Also true.
So the fact that patches is gone actually hurts the deck a lot because it means that some of its strengths go away and a lot of its synergies become weaker. Also, it lost Quarter Creeper and Bone Mare, and it was just like one of the best shells for those cards. So like you just took away kind of a critical mass of power in the available cards, such that maybe the deck is gone now, and maybe not. We might see some form of Tempo Rogue in the future. Yeah, hard to say.
Like we mentioned, Mage technically did lose Quarter Creeper, and then you could also say lost Patches, and you could say that about a couple other decks. But for one, as you mentioned, Rogue was leaning way more heavily on Patches, and Patches is how Quarter Creeper is good.
Yeah,
like
right.
one of the best things about Quarter Creeper is how much better you playing Patches makes it. So it also is kind of leaning more heavily on Quarter Creeper. And unlike Mage, it was also using Bone Mare, pretty much always using 2 copies of that card. So the nerf was definitely most brutal for Rogue, no question.
Yeah.
But it was just a big mess of good cards, right? So there might be a new mess of good cards that will be effective.
Yeah, maybe it's time to bring Finja back.
Yeah, he got indirectly nerfed because of the Murloc War Leader thing, but he could be good enough now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's Kelesith is sort of what basically was keeping you from doing that, but maybe you could run a Spiteful Rogue with Sprint, and no Kelesith. I don't know. That sounds dumb.
Yeah, I don't know. 7 drops might not even be worth it.
Yeah, right. But a deck that is strong in Rogue right now, or maybe not strong, but worth keeping an eye on is Miracles.
Yes, I was looking. That's not doing too bad, and the it seems like Swashbuckler's just like, sorry, buddy.
Yeah,
you're not invited anymore unless you don't have your friend with you. You're uninvited.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
he thought he was good, but it was actually entirely his friend.
Yep. Yeah, Swashbuckler is in fact the Duff in that partnership there. So it's real unfortunate. But Miracle Rogue itself is really strong, and Sap is awesome in a meta with Spiteful Summoner that makes like Sap is just awesome. It's a very good card. It was awesome, even before this patch. I really liked playing it against Q Block, which is a good deck right now, and it can do wonders against pretty much any deck. 2 mana is a really good price to pay for that effect. So
do miracles against any deck.
Yeah, it can still win out of nowhere with double Eviscerate and double Cold Blood and Leroy Jenkins. So
the point about Spiteful Summoner, I didn't think about that. But that's a really great point. That's basically one of the best ways to hose that card is Sap. And then more, of course, also more Q Block. That's another one of the few ways they're going to be happy when they play their big bad cards. It's like Sap, too bad, dude.
Right. Yeah, it makes Possessed Lackey a lot less scary.
Yeah, the Lackey, even like the setup for the combo, you can stop that. And Big Priest, it's also going to be effective against Big Priest.
Yeah, definitely. So it's good against decks that are cheating out minions. Many decks are doing that. So that the Miracles list I saw on VS actually is running 1 Sap and 2 Shiv. I'm running 2 Saps, and I think I'm at 0 Shiv because I also am running 2 Vile Spines. But anyway, it's
that's another good card right now if people are cheating minions as Vile Spine Slayer, right? Yeah,
exactly. These are good cards against sort of minion-based strategies, and right now we're seeing a lot of Spiteful. So this deck could have a future. Unfortunately, the loss of patches does impact it pretty significantly. It removes it makes you not want to run Swashbuckler, which makes your sort of OTK-based strategies a little weaker. But you still have Leroy, and you still have just random minions, and you can run Firefly. That's a good card. So. there's a lot of places this deck can go. It's worth looking at. This kind of deck gets really strong as people play slower strategies.
Yeah, I think that it it can potentially become a pretty strong contender. Firefly just seems great because it's two things for your little combo stuff,
hmm
and it
Have you
still can beat up some Murlocs.
have you played Falderai Strider yet?
I have not.
Oh man, that card is awesome.
It seems fun. It makes me want to use a Shadow Step.
Yeah, I think I'm running one copy of Shadow Step in my build.
Yeah, with the
It's
two Vile Spines, that makes sense.
yeah. So Falderai Strider is a really solid card. It's like it seems like you play it and then you get something later maybe, but in Miracles you end up actually doing a lot of card drawing just because a lot of your cards say draw a card on it. And you also have Auctioneer, so you will get value out of it eventually. And it's not even like as long as you can make the game go long enough, the guaranteed value you get out of it is really huge.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's 4 mana for 16 power and 16 health.
yeah, over time. And the like playing it in multiples just makes it better. Uh, Also, the
hmm
card on its own is not bad. A 4 mana 4/4 is a fine card.
Yeah, it's you're not setting yourself back to set yourself up.
Yes.
That's a problem with so many cards.
Oh yeah.
That like Imp Master. You can basically say that's why that card's not very good. Sure, getting a 1/1 every turn is a cool thing to set up, but if you're getting a weak minion out of it, it's not good enough.
Right.
But
The
he does
upside is
not
just
have
not
that
there.
problem.
Yeah, the upside, quote unquote, of that card is like trying to make up for the downsides of the card. So you actually have to jump over a pretty big hurdle before you get anything real positive. But with Falderai Strider, that's the idea. Is like, yeah, it's a little bit understated. I mean, no one's jumping out of no one's jumping to play Children Yetis, but people are happy to play 4 mana 5/4s and stuff with some incidental effect. So Falderai Strider is a 4 mana 4/4 with an incidental effect is a fine deal, especially because the effect is very strong.
Yeah, it also fills like a pretty great slot to fill in Rogue. Like there's not many other really excellent 4 drops, and it likes to
hmm
have those.
Yeah, so it's basically that and the Minstrel. What's nice is it synergizes with drawing cards. So Miracle Rogue is already like basically hoping to win the game because it draws more cards than its opponent, and this is just like another way to make that possible. And that is like enough. That's plenty.
It's a
So
really great card for Rogue.
yes, it's very very good. And it's still running just a bunch of the old favorites. Obviously, Auctioneer, Minstrel, very good card still, and Van Cleef. Sometimes you just win the game because you have Edwin Van Cleef on turn one and a couple of counterfeit coins.
Yeah, a counterfeit coin also is great with Minstrel. Just
Definitely.
like getting him out there turn 3 and then having, he can get you your turn 4 Falderai, plus he does technically thin your deck out. That's just
Yeah.
another way in which the Falderai Strider synergizes with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's a really solid card.
are you bothering to use Spellbreaker?
In that deck, I'm actually not because sap.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost redundant, but the fact that there's Minstrel in the deck means that like um, silver bullet style cards like Hungry Crab are better because you can yank them out of your deck. Like if assuming it's a minion, if there's a minion that is particularly good against a particularly common strategy, you can kind of count on getting it a lot more frequently in that deck.
That's definitely true. So I think that like, yeah, that's certainly the case. The deck has a bunch of minions already that kind of deal with minions, right? Like Vile Spine, SI7, and it has sap. So I think the value of Spellbreaker goes down a bit, though. Of course, it's not obsolete. I mean, you'd much rather silence a Void Lord than kill it. So
Yeah, it's probably worth considering if there's a lot more Q block, but if there's a lot more Murloc Paladin, you could throw crabs in. You might not need both Fireflies. I don't know what you would want to cut,
yeah,
but you would be able to get that crab more frequently, and it can still be really great later in the game. Or just whatever starts winning. If everybody starts playing dragons, you could throw the 4/3 in your deck,
yeah,
and
totally.
be able to tug that out. Give your deck a good tug. Um,
Yeah, sometimes it's what you got to do.
so that's another sort of nice thing about the Miracle Rogue list, and really some a new trait that Rogue has now that the Minstrel is around is that it can sort of the same thing with Hunter because it has the Stitch Tracker.
Right.
If there's a hate card, a particularly sweet thing in that moment, you can grab it. But I think Minstrel's definitely better than Tracker because it's card advantage.
Yes, I
More
agree with
card
that.
advantage, rather.
I think Minstrel's considerably better than Stitch Tracker, especially because like the Miracles deck actually doesn't have that many minions in it to begin with.
Yeah, so you can count more on getting something that you want.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really solid. I think that's pretty much all the classes. I think we covered all of them.
I don't really think we really talked about Warrior.
That's true. We did not. And we kind of also really didn't talk about Shaman either.
Yeah, I didn't really honestly read anything about them. I just saw that they were so down in the win rate dumpster that it's probably still just Token Shaman, and not Pirate Warrior.
Yeah. It seems to me like, Warrior got hit even harder just because like now it doesn't even have neutral cards to lean on. It just like has nothing.
It goes without saying that the patch's nerf smashed Pirate Warrior pretty hard.
Right. So it's just that card has been getting beaten real bad by the balance changes, Warrior in particular. Shaman, like, it's just not the deck right now. I think Evolve got kind of nerfed a little bit by a lot of the understated Battlecry minions that exist in like KNC. But
and also Patches is really great with that strategy. Corridor Creeper is really great with that strategy. Actually, Corridor Creeper is still almost fine. If you're just gonna cash it in immediately, you don't mind that it lost 3 power. So I guess maybe that's maybe that card still does have a home, but I don't know if it probably just wants to like hang out at school when school's out, doesn't want to go home.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the 2 Token Shaman lists on VS, and they both have Corridor Creeper, so that's a really good point that you bring up.
Or Unstable Evolution if it's running that. I'm looking at the one Warrior deck, which is Fibonacci's Meme Warrior. It has a Sudden Genesis in it, which listeners may not know what that card does.
I don't know what that card does. What does it do?
It is a 5-mana warrior spell. It's a real card in Hearthstone.
I see. Okay.
You summon a copy of each of your damaged minions.
Wow.
For 5 mana. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna not play that deck.
So like if you play Injured Blade Master, right, and then you play Sudden Genesis, you'll get another 4/3.
That's what a deal for 5 mana.
I know. It's very much a meme card, but it looks like that's all that's left to Garrosh at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't really seen Shaman or Warrior in my play sessions at all. Nor have I seen a lot of Rogue, but no.
Yeah, I had forgotten that Rogue was a class entirely after the patch.
Yeah, well, I mean, because it was like not a class; it was just neutral cards, but also a couple good class cards. Yeah, it's a shame, but we'll see. These things can change. It's still early.
Yep, there's always chances that some other strategies will be found in the coming few days, or after the other classes settle on their decks and their lists, then Shaman and Warrior will have an opportunity to like, okay, now that we know what we're fighting against, we can make something that beats that.
Yeah, definitely.
But whether Warrior will be playing Spiteful Summoner and the pendant thing, it's 7 mana thing.
The Spellstone.
Yeah. That might be what Warrior's doing in a few weeks, or it might be some Control Warrior, it might be some Aggressive Warrior, probably isn't going to be Pirate Warrior. Who knows? Shaman, it still looks like if it's going to be a deck, it's going to be some kind of Token Shaman.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what its class is geared to do right now, so we'll just have to see how these classes evolve. There's a lot of room for exploration still,
which is exciting.
Yeah, it is. Do you think that's a good place to wrap up?
Yeah, definitely. Take a look at Vicious Syndicate, maybe some other places for information on decks that are doing well and stuff. There's power in numbers. And if there's one card that I would recommend thinking about, it'd be Hungry Crab.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. I think that like Hungry Crab, at least this instant, is really good. And as long as Murloc Paladin has a presence, it'll continue to be a good tech option, especially if you're looking to just get a 1 or 2% edge on your opponents at from ranks 5 to 1 or something, or in Legend. But yeah, like you said, check out sites like VS and HS Replay. Like this data in Hearthstone is really good compared to other games, and especially early in a meta, there's no shame in quote unquote net decking. Or even if you don't want to just copy a list verbatim on the internet and you want to sort of explore yourself, if that's your bag of chips, it's good to know what you're up against.
Yeah, that's really why it's so critical. Even
Yes.
if you're not going to play a single one of these decks, that doesn't make this information any less important.
Yeah, these are important sources. Competitive Reddit is, of course, also a really great place to go to see, what people are having success with and what kind of decks they're seeing, especially in the first few days after a patch. That tends to be like the sole source of information that I guess in HS Replay. But anyway, check out these sources. Keep your ears to the ground. We're hoping for some interesting changes in the coming weeks. So
and you can
see
really one of the things that you can see on VS is which decks are winning or losing in each rank, and that's something that some of the more sweeping statistics don't include. But once you see how different it can be at different ranks, you'll realize that you really do want to look at that, and what deck is the best deck for you to play is going to be maybe a lot different from what quote unquote the best deck in Hearthstone is right now.
Definitely.
That's another really great piece of information on Vicious Syndicate. I can't actually find it right now, but I know it's on here somewhere.
Yeah, there's yeah, I mean, again, all these statistics are using them the right way will give you an edge. But just looking at them is way better than not looking at them. In the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/LastTurnHS.
Yeah, you can also look at our junk.
Yeah, look at our stuff too. We don't do like data analysis that we do make public or whatever, but we like memes. And we also post about our own content. So if you like our content, please go check us out.
You can see all our episodes and find when new ones are coming out.
Yep, soundcloud.com/lastturn is where you can find a lot of this, lastturnhs.com. Of course, follow social media, Twitter, like I said, or Facebook at facebook.com/lastturnhs. Check us out in any of these places. You can get all of our content. Hit us up, contact us. You can find us, you can find us there. Just tweet at us and we'll try to tweet back.
Yep, Facebook. If you go to lastturnhs.com, you can also see all of our stuff and we have a Kobolds and Catacombs spoiler. You can also contact us from there.
Yeah, totally. So we hope to see you guys exploring the Catacombs a bit more now that they've opened up a tiny bit, and we will catch you next turn.
See you next turn, everybody.